Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Scott Ritter. I am so happy, and I really mean it, to see Scott back safe and sound. Really, the audience was hoping that you will be back safe and sound, and so I am. I'm very happy that you're back, Scott. Thank you so much for joining me for another conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I guess we've flipped the script. You're in Russia now, and I'm not. So I'm jealous, but that's okay.
But maybe today we won't be talking so much about your trip because we are limited with time. So those questions about Russia, probably the next time I will be addressing, unless we still have a little time for one question. Today, I would like to start with this. During the recent meeting in Sochi and the conversation between President Putin and Lukashenko, President of Belarus, Putin confirmed that at the beginning of July, I think 6th or 7th, the tactical nuclear weapons will be installed in Belarus. Question here, how dangerous are those weapons? What are the consequences, damages when they are used? And will the United States install some kind of similar weapons in Ukraine?
Let's start with the last part first, just so we calm everybody down. The United States will never deploy nuclear weapons on Ukrainian soil. It isn't going to happen. One, to do that, the United States would have to enter into a unilateral agreement with Ukraine that would violate its commitment to the NATO nuclear umbrella. It would be an extraordinarily destabilizing thing. Ukraine neither has the infrastructure, training. There's nothing about Ukraine that allows it to be a responsible, recipient of nuclear weapons. And you have to ask yourself why you would give it to Ukraine, because it's not as a deterrent. Ukraine's already at war. So basically, it would be the United States saying, we want to die, we want to commit suicide, we will do this. That isn't going to happen. So everybody should just rest easy. No American nuclear weapons, no NATO nuclear weapons will ever be deployed on Ukrainian soil, ever, guaranteed. You can take that to the bank and run with it. But let's get up to what's going on about Belarus. Understand that the United States has 100 B-61 tactical nuclear weapons deployed in 5 different locations in Europe and NATO. So the United States already has nuclear weapons deployed on the ground in Europe, and these weapons are allocated to non-nuclear NATO nations. That means, for instance, Germany, in a time of war, Germany has aircraft that have been outfitted with the proper avionics and other support. The pilots are trained so that an American nuclear bomb can be loaded onto a German aircraft, which can then deliver the nuclear weapon in accordance with NATO doctrine. This makes Germany feel like it's part of the NATO nuclear enterprise. Italy is the same way. I believe the Netherlands is the same way. I think Belgium might be the same way. Turkey is the same way. Russia has complained about this from the very beginning. They say this is inherently destabilizing, and it's a blatant violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But NATO has ignored it. Now we have a situation where NATO has bragged about, and the European Union has bragged about, and Poland has bragged about, and the Baltic states have bragged about the need to destabilize Belarus to the point where Lukashenko is removed from power. There's been some talk around the border of maybe even, if that happens, military force coming into Belarus. Belarus has entered into a strategic alliance with Russia. They now have unified military. They have sort of a quasi-unified political system. And to make Belarus secure under the Russian nuclear umbrella, the Russian government, Vladimir Putin, and the Russian military have decided that they will deploy a certain number of Russian tactical nuclear weapons onto Belarus soil. And these weapons have been dedicated to Belarus delivery systems, Su-25 aircraft and Iskander-M surface-to-surface missiles. The Belarus military has received these weapons. They've trained on these weapons. These weapons have been appropriately modified to handle nuclear weapons. And now the Russian nuclear weapons are there. Like the NATO nuclear weapons, for instance, Germany can't just pick up the phone and say, give me a B-61 bomb today, guys, I'm going to go bomb Russia. It doesn't work that way. NATO has to agree that nuclear weapons be released, and the United States has to release the weapon to the Germans, supervise it being loaded on, and then the German plane will go where the United States and NATO tells it to go. So the Belarusians can't just wake up one morning and go, oh, the hell with Poland, load up 5 nukes, take Poland out. Isn't going to happen. First of all, Russia controls the nukes. These are Russian nuclear weapons. If Belarus is ever to use these, it will be because something has happened. The West has threatened Belarus, attacked Belarus, threatens its very existence, and then Russia will make a determination together with Belarus that nuclear weapons release authority is there. They will release the weapons to Belarus, and Belarus will deliver the weapons where the Russians tell them to deliver them. So, having said all that, the likelihood of these weapons ever being used is slim to none. But it is an inherently destabilizing situation. It's an expansion of nuclear capacity, not a retraction. I think we should all be in favor of retracting nuclear profiles, nuclear weapon systems, et cetera. It's an expansion, but it's an expansion that, frankly speaking, is absolutely necessary if we're ever to be able to get rid of these. Why? Because the United States had an imbalance in capability. We had 100 B-61 bombs on European soil allocated to NATO. Russia had no equivalent. So when you get into horse trading in the nuclear disarmament talks, there is no Russian equivalent for that. So Russia, when asking the United States to get rid of that, the United States, of course, is saying, well, what's in it for us? What do we get out of this? And if Russia can't give something that's analogous to it, the United States says, no, well, we're going to continue to hold on to this thing. Now Russia has the analogy. They say, we have our nuclear weapons in Belarus. If you want us to get rid of these, then you got to get rid of those. And now we've created the situation where we can possibly in the future talk about responsive arms control. It's the same thing that happened with the INF Treaty. The Russians deployed the SS-20 missile in the 1970s. NATO had no equivalent to it. Russia had this unilateral advantage that threatened and destabilized Europe. So in order to get the Russians or the Soviets to agree to get rid of the SS-20, we had to deploy ground-launched cruise missiles and Pershing II missiles into Europe. Inherently destabilizing, very dangerous thing to do. But now that we put chips on the table, when we told the Russians to get rid of their chips, we had chips to get rid of. And what happened? We signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and all the chips were removed from the table. So this is a bad situation. It's unfortunate. It's an escalation, but it does leave the window open for equitable arms control down the road that gets rid of all these nuclear weapons of this nature. The 100 B-61 bombs and the Russian tactical nuclear weapons have been allocated for Belarusian use.
But if it's ever used,
then we all die.
Okay, thanks.
There's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. There's no such thing as a demonstration. There's no such thing as we're just escalation to de-escalate. If we just use a nuclear weapon, show them our resolve, then they'll back down. Russia has made it clear, if you use a single nuclear weapon against us, we will release all our nuclear weapons. Everybody will die, but we'll be martyrs.
All right, so now we know. Scott, on July 11th, which, by the way, this is the 80th anniversary of Wołyń massacre, NATO will have a summit in Vilnius in Lithuania. I would like to ask you this here. It's a little complex story because lately Rasmussen made some statements during his interview that were, I mean, if they don't agree on helping Ukraine more, then some countries like Poland might do things on their own. And I have a very strong sense that this summit might redirect certain moves. I would like to ask you this, because Poland, before I let you speak, Poland is going into elections, parliamentary elections in November. Let's just talk about this for a moment. Then we have United States elections next year in November. And then we have Ukraine elections in March next year. So how convenient would it be to continue with this for another year at least, until all those elections are set in place, or in a way maybe postponed or maybe not happening, so those who are in power would remain in power? question here, what do you expect from this summit? Is there anything that is, in your opinion, going to change this situation, or what decisions they might make on this summit?
Well, first thing, we know that the Ukrainians have been pressured into carrying out a counteroffensive when they weren't ready to carry out a counteroffensive. Why? Because the hope was that the Ukrainians could achieve some sort of demonstrable success leading up to the Vilnius summit, success that would therefore somehow legitimize the NATO posture, NATO decision-making, the decisions made to supply the Ukrainians with these weapons, et cetera. Decisions, by the way, that are increasingly coming under scrutiny by NATO members who are recognizing the damage done to their national security by draining their armories and giving it to the Ukrainians. The bad news for NATO is that the counteroffensive is going to fail. It cannot succeed. It will not succeed. It has no chance of succeeding. And frankly speaking, everybody knew that it would fail. But it was one of those things that had to be done. And so it was done. So when they gather in Vilnius, they're going to be dealing with the reality of a Ukrainian failure and the other reality that there's nothing NATO can do in the short term to rectify this failure. There aren't another 12 brigades that could be raised by the Ukrainians, equipped by NATO, trained by NATO, and be brought to the front lines in any meaningful period of time. So now NATO is going to have to answer the question, what next? The sane person would say, it's time we admit we were defeated and we seek a diplomatic off-ramp to this war to stop the killing and stop the destruction of Ukraine. That would be the sane answer, but NATO is an insane organization. But it's not as insane as Mr. Rasmussen, who came up with the notion of creating a coalition of the willing, he called it. Now, that's an important term, coalition of the willing. Why? Because NATO is a consensus-driven organization. So when you say the coalition of the willing, you're implying that there are some unwilling, which means that whatever coalition he puts together, it will not be a NATO force. It will not be protected by NATO. It's on its own. And so now you ask your question, well, gosh, who would be dumb enough to do that? Well, we know the answer, Poland. Poland would be dumb enough to do that. And Poland would be looking to Lithuania to be dumb enough to do that, and Estonia and Latvia to be dumb enough to do that, not to go through Belarus, because Belarus has nuclear weapons and they would be destroyed, but to send their troops to Poland and enter Western Ukraine with this expeditionary force, the coalition of the willing. Sounds good when you're Rasmussen, who is a cowardly sack of manure, who doesn't know anything about waging war. Sounds good. I mean, I'm very good at talking too. Fact is, I could tell you right now that I want to go fight the Russian boxing champion, or go to Chechnya again and tell the Chechens, give me your #1 mixed martial art guy. I want to fight him. And I could tell you all day long how I'm going to beat him to a pulp. He's going to walk into the ring and I'm going to hit him, take him down. I'm going to win. And see how good I'm talking. I'm making it sound good. And then the second I get into the ring, he knocks me out. Because why? He's a better fighter than I am. All I did is talk. Poland doesn't have an army. I challenge any Polish officer to correct me on this one. But I will make the following point. General Christopher Cavoli, the Supreme Allied Commander, commander of U.S. forces in Europe, has said to a Swedish Defense Forum in January that NATO did not imagine, could not imagine, has not imagined the scope of violence that's taking place in Ukraine today. Now, those are important words, because if you can't imagine it, it means you didn't think it. And if you didn't think it, it means you haven't prepared for it. You haven't trained for it. You don't have the equipment for it. You don't have the doctrine for it. You don't have logistical sustainability for it. You can't do it. That's the bottom line. And this is an American general who knows the capabilities of the American military. And the American military is 1 million times better than anything Poland could put in the field today. So now the coalition of the willing is not going to be American troops. Newsflash, Poland, America is not going to commit suicide. They'll let you do it. Now, you go in there with your Polish army. Your Polish army is all going to die because you don't know how to wage war, not the modern way. Why do I know this? Because the head of NATO said they didn't imagine it, and you're part of NATO, and I can guarantee you, you didn't imagine it. You don't know how to fight combined arms warfare. you can't carry out a combined arms campaign of maneuver capable of defeating the Russian army in the battlefield. The Russians don't do theory, they do reality right now. And one of the realities we see is that the Russians are implementing their defensive doctrine by the book. The guy who wrote the book, by the way, Colonel General Alexander Romanchuk, has been pulled out of the academy where he conceived the idea. He built the defense, he put the handpicked units in it, and he's commanding it. So the best thing Russia could ever do, if you're going to say, what could Russia possibly do to make this defense strongest in the world? They've done everything. And that's why the Ukrainians will never crack it. And the Ukrainians, unlike the Poles, are capable of fighting this fight. They've proven it. You can say whatever you want about the Ukrainians, about their government, but don't you ever tell me the Ukrainian soldier can't fight, because they're fighting. They're not winning, but they're fighting. That's something you can't say about the Polish. You bring the Polish army in, I mean, how big is Rasmussen's coalition of the willing going to be? It's going to have to be pretty big, because we know that 60,000 Ukrainians are dying right now trying to crack a Russian defensive position that can't be cracked. So what? Is Poland going to generate 100,000 troops? You need something like that, or else you shouldn't even be talking about it. 100,000 troops. Logistically, that's a nightmare. How is Poland going to sustain that? Every mile or kilometer, since we're talking about Europe, that the Polish coalition of the willing advances in Ukraine is a kilometer that they need to bring gas, ammunition, and other logistical stuff. The further they come in, the longer the supply chain is, and keep going. And guess what happens, ladies and gentlemen? You have a long, extended, vulnerable line of communication that the Russians will now bomb into history. So every truck you have on that disappears. So the bad news for Poland is their army is going to be defeated before they even get close to the Russians, because they will run out of gas, run out of everything. It won't exist. The good news is that might be the best chance these Polish soldiers have of living, because they can abandon their vehicles and walk home. But if they do make it next to the Russians, then the Russians will eviscerate them, because you see, Colonel General Alexander Romanchuk, when he wrote the book on Russian defense doctrine, the modern version of it, not only has innovative concepts such as an initial screen based upon flexible defense that sucks the enemy in on avenues that you want them to come in before they reach the initial defensive line, then you saturate them with artillery while suppressing everything with air defense. You kill everybody, counterattack, and push them back. That's the localized thing. But the next thing that happens is you receive the attack, the whole attack. You defeat the attack, and then you go on the counterattack. And the Russians are very good at the counterattack, because the counterattack is premised on the notion that the enemy has expended the bulk of their combat power by fruitlessly punching into your defensive position. You've cut them apart. They're in disarray. And now you hit them with a well planned out counterattack that slices through them like a hot knife through butter. That's the awful reality of this. So bring it on, coalition of the willing. Come closer to the Russians. They might even just sit there and chuckle at you while they say, attack us. And you attack them, then they will counterattack, and you will all die. That's the future of any coalition of the willing stupid enough to enter in Ukraine. And the good news is, every military professional knows this. Only idiots like Rasmussen will even articulate the possibility. Therefore, it will not be considered in Vilnius. It's a non-starter.
Thank you. Here is my take on this, since I follow Polish politics and have some, trying to stay humble, a little bit more understanding that an average viewer has. Army is one thing, but politicians and those leaders in power, it's another thing. It's very convenient to take, let's say, 50,000 troops, create the situation, extend this conflict, I'm talking from Polish side, just to postpone the election, announce the state of emergency, and continue being in power until this conflict is solved. This is the reason, Scott, you understand. Army is one thing. Army might be, what the heck are you doing there in those positions? What are you doing there? But then you have those politicians who are creating all this narrative, those balloons from Belarus, those rockets in the middle of the forest, all of this, to have a certain narrative going on, to prepare the population. However, Polish people are not stupid. A lot of Polish people are waking up to what's really going on, or even if they don't, they are up to here with this support for Ukraine because they are suffering as the citizens. And on the top of it, they are like, why are we going to sacrifice our lives? Question here, do you think, whatever this coalition is, how many countries? So you said Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, who else?
Estonia, maybe Slovakia, maybe the Czech Republic.
5, 6, right?
Yeah.
5, 6. And so this is that. Now, do you think with this, they can create some kind of false event, blame it as always, you know, on who? On Putin, to go in? Do you think this is very much likely what can happen? Because as you said, there will be no agreement on this during the summit.
Well, I think it's already done. To give you an example, the counteroffensive will be, I believe, over by the time the Vilnius summit begins, and the world will be reflecting on the fact that there's 40 to 50,000 dead Ukrainians and no Ukrainian army left worthy of the name. Ukrainian civilians will be once again streaming across the border into Poland. There will be a refugee crisis unfolding at the time of the Vilnius summit, and that'll be the excuse that they're used to put these coalition of the willing into Western Ukraine to create a humanitarian buffer zone to take care of these people there because Poland can't receive them here. That's what they can say, and that's what they can do. The problem comes in the execution of that, because to sell that, let's say you create the problem, you create the crisis, and now the Polish government says we need to do this because of we can't have 10 million Ukrainians coming across the border. We have to keep them there, so we have to go there and protect them from the evil Russians that are marching on them. And the Polish people are going, tell us more. How does this end? What do you see? What's next? And they put a story together. And then the 50,000 go in and they all die, because that's what's going to happen to them. They're all going to die. And now the Polish people say, and now what? Now we suspend rights, we suspend the election. It's a state of emergency. I mean, I'm not an expert in Polish history, but I do remember solidarity. I do remember
was hijacked too, by the way.
It's been hijacked since then. Right. But what I'm saying is, or maybe even at the time, but my point is, the Polish people have a history of saying, no, we don't support the government that's in power. And I could see a scenario where the longshoremen in the Polish ports just said, we're not working anymore, we're done striking. People at the airport say, we're done, shut her down. Train workers, we're done, shut it down. We're shutting the country down until we have an election that puts the government in place that we want, not what you people do. And what is the Polish government going to do at that point? The military just got eviscerated, 50,000 dead in Ukraine. You think the military is going to sit there and say, yeah, we're going to shoot guns at our own people now? Or do you think the military would say, you're on your own, dictator Polish government, and feed them to the fish? I don't know. I can't predict the future. Nobody can. But I'm just saying that anybody that thinks that the scenario you just laid out lends itself to stability and a strengthening of the Polish government, I would say that it's far more likely it would lead to the societal collapse of Poland and a quasi-revolution that would push these people out of power. And that here's another reason why nobody will support this coalition of the willing. Because the scenario I just laid out, I can guarantee you, even in the dementia-ridden Biden administration, that people like Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken would be in the White House Situation Room, and they would run through the scenario I just did. And they would say, at a time when we're trying to speak of NATO unity and the importance of NATO values, which include democracy and include non-interference in democracy by the military, do we really want to allow Poland to undertake an initiative that we believe has a 90% chance in resulting in a revolution in Poland and the Polish military becoming politicized? Is that what we want? Especially since we have American troops on Polish soil. Is this what we want? And the answer is no. So I believe that whatever Polish politicians are doing, I will tell you this, all the American president has to do is pick up the phone. Well, he won't do it because he's dementia ridden, but have his representative pick up the phone, Jake Sullivan pick up the phone and call the Polish president and say, no, stop, you're done, finish, Zippo, don't want to hear another word of it, because you're not a real leader, you work for me. You work for America. America will tell you what to do. And I'm sorry you made that choice when you invited us in. When you said, please send me the American troops, send me the 5th Corps, send me the brigade, send me all that. The second you did that, you lost your right to say anything because we're in charge now. American lives are on the line, and we're not going to let you do anything stupid enough to put them at risk and threaten everything we are trying to build here. So Poland, pound sand. And that's the answer. Poland's not going to do anything you just said because America won't let them do it.
So here I actually, with all the respect, I disagree.
God, that's the beauty of discussions like this.
I feel like they want to sacrifice Poland, and I feel like those politicians are so power hungry that they will absolutely don't mind to go with that because they protected their butts already in numerous different ways. However, what I absolutely agree with, Scott, what you said, that some common sense of Polish citizens and self-preservation can save the day. Of course, God saves the day, but self-preservation and some common sense. So the citizens can actually save the day, in my opinion.
Well, that would make the Polish citizens 400 times better than the American citizens, because I've been begging the American citizens to save the day, and we're not doing a very good job of it.
So do we have, how much more time do we have? I'm really checking the time. It's important.
We have 30 minutes.
Okay, fantastic. So let's make it like 20. I want to ask you, because I recorded a video today. Yesterday, there was a meeting, and I didn't know exactly what kind of meeting it was, but now I know. It was with some war journalists, I believe. And during that meeting, Putin mentioned, he was asked about Polish mercenaries fighting, not only Polish, but it was specifically about Polish fighting in Ukraine. You know, this has been going on for a long time, Scott, and you talk about it. We've talked on my channel about it. Why do you think, I have my own answer, but I want to hear from you. Why do you think Russia has never, because they could, this is like act of war, in my opinion. This is declaration of war, especially when that legion was announced in February, and they were recruiting with people who are willing to be part of it and get paid, of course, right? And the contract was signed officially with the Ministry of National Defense of the Republic of Poland. This is serious stuff. Why do you think Russia never really talk about it publicly? And yeah, like, why they didn't do anything? They could a long time ago, right, about it?
Well, first of all, if you talk about something, you highlight it. And then you have a political problem, because having highlighted it, people are going to say, well, you brought it up. You're the one who talked about it. What's your solution to it? And then Russia would have to be in a difficult situation of either coming up with a solution to deal with the problem they themselves talked about, or being seen as weak, talking about something but not doing anything about it. So now we come to, I think now we understand Russia's silence, because they don't want to highlight something and be compelled, therefore, to do something. Ask yourself this: if you're the Poles or the Ukrainians, would you prefer a situation where Russia executed its strategic vision on Ukraine without NATO intervention or with NATO intervention? And the answer is you want NATO to intervene. That's the idea, because it's the only way you can salvage the situation. The only way this thing ends is if NATO comes in and says, it's done, we're intervening, big boys are here, etc. I personally believe the Russians wouldn't care about that, but the Russians want to avoid that situation, because it leads to nuclear war. So Russia wants to keep NATO out of Ukraine. Poland and Ukraine want to bring NATO in. So Poland and Ukraine do things like sign this agreement on the Legion. It's done publicly. You know about it. I know about it. Everybody knows about it. Russia knows about it. Everybody knows about it. They do it. They actually recruit the troops. They send them in, and they're on the front lines getting slaughtered like everybody else. And we know that because the Russian videos on Telegram show them walking around, rolling over the body. There's the Polish passport. They know it. They listen. They intercept. They hear all the Polish voices screaming for their mommies as they burn alive inside a vehicle. I'm saying that for the benefit of the Polish people. Understand what this is. This isn't a game. It's not a video game. It's your sons, your husbands, and your uncles and your brothers dying in the worst possible way, because that's what war is. But that's happening. And the Russians know this. Two things. One, the Polish guys aren't winning. They're dying. So from a Russian perspective, problem solved. They're dead. Two, for Russia to highlight it and make it an issue where then Russia has to do something, you've done what the Poles and the Ukrainians want you to do. For Russia to continue to ignore this problem and respond to it by simply killing the Polish mercenaries on the battlefield keeps the battlefield within the framework of what Russia wants, keeping NATO out. Russia is in the business of escalation management, which means at times Russia will turn a blind eye and deaf. They'll become the three monkeys,
Yes.
saying, and that's what Russia's doing right now about the Poles, because it doesn't matter. This is the big wake-up call to the Polish people. You don't matter. I'm sorry, you don't. There's nothing you can do to change the outcome on the battlefield. Russia's going to win. Every Polish soldier you send to the front line will die, be wounded, be captured, or run away in fear. There will be no victory. And if you said, well, we're willing to do that so long as we get Russia to overreact, Russia's not going to overreact. Russia's taking this slow and easy. They're just going to keep grinding away. They're going to do a counterattack. It's not going to be dramatic, because the thing about drama is it attracts attention. The Russians will continue to kill people and then slowly advance until their objectives are achieved. And they will do this with escalation management in mind. And the key aspect of that is to keep NATO out of the conflict, regardless of all the provocations of Poland. And these are serious provocations, as you mentioned.
Yes.
This isn't trivial.
No.
Let me put it this way. If the United States was Russia and we caught Mexican troops across the border fighting with people we were fighting with, we'd bomb Mexico into the Stone Age. So if the United States was Russia in the same situation, and we found Polish divisions on the front line fighting us, Poland would cease to exist. And that's what Poland deserves, to be honest, because you're a party to the conflict. But you're being spoiled. And one of the aspects of being spoiled in this manner is you actually think that you're stronger than you are because you're paying no consequence. Poland's a very weak nation. You're not a very strong nation. Your economy could be shut down like that. Select targeting. You don't have an air defense system worthy of the name. So if the Russians decided to at any time, they could shut down the totality of the Polish economy. They could make your life a living hell. Your army can't fight. Again, I challenge any Polish officer who contradict me on this, but your army is incapable of the kind of war that's taking place in Ukraine. Why? Because, as General Kaboli said, Poland hasn't imagined this conflict. You haven't prepared for this conflict. You're not trained for this conflict. You're not equipped for this conflict. Your men wouldn't know how to survive in this conflict. So Russia doesn't care about you enough to allow you to provoke Russia into doing something that would achieve your objectives, NATO intervention.
Nor America does care about you to sacrifice.
America doesn't care anything about Poland. Understand that.
So there you have everyone from Scott Ritter for today. I had many questions about his recent trip to Russia.
We have about 20 minutes if you'd like.
Oh, we do? Okay. Are you sure? Are you sure? Okay.
Unless my clock is wrong. My clock says 12:03,
okay.
and my drop dead moment is 12:30. So
okay. Great.
It's up to you if you want to say
no. I will ask you just two questions. Maybe one will be quick answer and one a little longer.
Maybe.
But I have a lot of questions for you about Russia, and I think next time I would really like to address it, because we will go deeper into the soul of the country. I think it's very important to talk about those things, those human aspects. So first of all, I really wanted to ask you, how happy was the Maverick to see you back?
Maverick was ecstatic. I mean, we actually filmed the moment. It was one of those made for Hallmark movie moments when he opened the door and he saw me, and he was just thrilled to death. All the dogs were. I have 3 dogs that apparently love me to death, and one of them's older, 12 years old, so she was a little bit slower, but she was extremely happy. The other one's a little 4-year-old Chihuahua who's normally a little timid, but he was there wagging. But Maverick was just like the Energizer Bunny on cocaine. He was just jumping all over the place, jumping up and down, and it was heartwarming. I mean, I always say that you can judge the character of a person by the way that they interact with dogs. The dogs are a pretty good reader. And that was sort of one of those moments where I felt pretty good about myself, because I'm saying, I must be doing something right if the dogs like me this much. Now, maybe it's because I'm a sucker that gives them snacks and I take them for walks and I do all that. But the bottom line is Maverick was very happy to see me, but so are my other dogs.
Oh, thank you, Scott. You're talking to a dog person. I love dogs, so I totally know what you're saying. It's the most beautiful love.
We have cats too. And I know you may not be a cat person, but our cats, we treat them like dogs. And when I came home, when my voice projected, the cats who are outdoor cats heard that, and they came running too. And then we have another cat, Anubis, the hairless cat, and he's there right now. He literally thinks he's a dog too, and he came running. So all my animals came to see me, and I was very happy to see that.
So let me ask you quickly now, because I feel like I'm checking the time. How, every travel, I believe, changes us and deepens us, and we grow and we evolve, and yeah, it's a very life transforming. That was such a special trip that you had. And like I said, I want to talk really about this a little bit more into details next time. But in a nutshell, how this trip has changed you as a person?
Well, very good question. I hate you for your good questions. There's a scene in Saving Private Ryan. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I've seen this.
Okay, at the end of the movie, Matt Damon's character goes to Normandy, and he goes to the gravestone of Tom Hanks' character who died saving Private Ryan. And he asks his wife, have I lived a good life? Basically, because Tom Hanks said, earn this. Have I lived a good life? And, this trip, I didn't know what to expect when I went on this trip, to be honest. It was 26 days, and that's just a long, long time. And I didn't know the people who were inviting me. So that's a little bit scary too. So you're sort of stepping off into the unknown. I was bringing my daughter with me, which is also because I'm responsible for her. So we're stepping off into this big adventure that we don't know how it's going to unfold. And it's taking a huge risk. One, they just killed Tatarsky. And while I was there, they tried to assassinate another person, they being the Ukrainians, in what was the name of the city that they did it in? Nizhny Novgorod, I believe it was. They attacked the car there. They had killed Daria Dugina in Moscow. And I'm on that list, and I'm going over there with my daughter, so I'm a little nervous about that. And then what happens when we come home? That was the big, I have to be honest, I didn't think I was going to get on the airplane. I thought that I was going to get pulled off the airplane by my government, that they wouldn't let me go on this trip. So it was, when you arrive in Russia, it's like, okay, I am literally stepping off into the unknown. I am Dorothy and the Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow starting down the yellow brick road. We're off to see the wizard, and that's happening.
Did you see the wizard? Did you see the wizard?
I did see the wizard. No, I didn't see the wizard. Not that guy. No, I didn't. I didn't see. The wizard was the Russian soul. I saw it. I got a glimpse into it. I can't claim to know everything about it, but I did get a glimpse into it. But what I found out is the guy who organized this is one of the most amazing human beings in the world, Alexander Zhirionov. Now he's a, he's a businessman, but he's also a government official. He operates this gray area between government and business. He runs what's called the Investment Development Agency of Novosibirsk. So he's the guy that is bringing in all the investment dollars, then streamlining the bureaucracy so that investments, so Novosibirsk can grow to be the city it is, the third largest city, the fastest growing economy. It's because of him, but he's not a rich man. This is a guy who, whatever money he makes, he pours back into Russia. This is a guy, and I don't want to get him in trouble. Alexander, I apologize, man, if I'm saying anything, but it's the truth. He admitted that when the war started, he wasn't supporting it. He wasn't the guy who painted a Z on his truck. He was like, what the hell are we doing? Why are we going in there? What is this really what we want to do? Kind of thing. But then when it became clear that this was an existential struggle for the survival of Russia, he is a Russian patriot. There's no greater patriot than Alexander Zhirionov. And he said, I love my country. And then he realized that there were some problems on the front lines with supplies, especially in Donetsk and Lugansk, because of the transition from militia to regular military. It was very ugly. And so he would go around and collect humanitarian goods. He would collect equipment, drones and things with his own money and other people's money. He would go and sort of pressure people. Hey, you say you support, did you volunteer to go? No. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going next week. Want to give me some money so I can buy some stuff? And he would put together convoys and drive them to the war zone. He's a civilian on his own volition with nobody telling him. He drives there and he distributes it. There's a photograph of him in Bakhmut, a civilian in Bakhmut giving equipment over to the civilians who need to survive in this area and to the military. And that's how he spends his money. I'm not going to pretend that he's a monk, but he's not an oligarch. He's not somebody sitting back there smoking cigars, living the high life. He is a very simple guy. When I got invited, I thought that this was a trip that was funded by Komsomolskaya Pravda, my Russian publisher, with support of the Russian government. That is the furthest thing from the truth. This trip was 100% funded by Alexander Zhirionov. He, on his own volition, reached out to me last July and said, hey, I watch you on YouTube. I like what you're saying. Why don't you come to Russia? I'll show you the place. And I thought that this is the the FSB trying to recruit me, standard recruiting pitch. Come in, do this, etc. And I said, no, I can't do it. But if you want it to happen, publish my book in Russian and I'll come on a book tour. And that would tell me that they would say, no, that's too hard. And he came back and said, send me the book. And then he had it translated. And then he found a publisher and he had it published. Now I'm looking at all that saying that proves that it's government connections. I mean, how does this all happen? Well, it happens because Alexander Zhirionov is like the Energizer bunny, and he just doesn't stop. He wanted this to happen. He went around, he made stuff happen. And even then, nobody believed I was going to show up. Every city that he lined up, he got commitments on the phone. Hey, if Scott Ritter comes, we'll do this, that, and the other thing. They all went, yeah, buddy, yeah. On the phone, Alexander's drinking again. He thinks Scott Ritter is going to come to Russia because he invited him and all that stuff. I showed up.
Scott, how many cities? How many cities quickly?
12.
12.
I showed up and Alexander started calling people going, Ritter's here. And they're going, what? And so as we're going, each city, he's coordinating what's going to happen because they didn't prepare. They didn't believe I was going to show up. So he's making it happen. And he's paying for everything. He sold his house. Sold his house to pay for this trip. I didn't find out about that till later. So now.
This is like another level.
And this guy there's no motive. I mean, if people go, what's the ulterior motive? What does he want? He wanted to show me Russia. And I feel so guilty about it because I said, hey, bring my daughters. And he went, yeah, bring them. I thought that it was being paid for by a publishing house, by the government. He, without hesitation, said, bring them. He paid for their ticket. Well, one daughter didn't come, but he paid for her ticket,
Yes.
hotels, everything, everything. He wouldn't let me pay for anything. I brought the money. I was ready. Every time I brought it out, I said, no, you're my guest. You're my guest. And I thought when he said my guest, he meant the guest of the Russian Federation. But no, I was his guest. So now ask me about my trip to Russia. And I'm that Matt Damon character. Did I earn it? And I want to. I want to earn this trip because this was the most freaking amazing trip of my life. Because, and it's made even more so because of what this guy did. It's one thing to have the government. I'm used to being shoveled around. I mean, I used to go to Paris on the French dime all the time when I was in the United Nations. So I'd be met by the French officials with they'd take me to the French hotel and they'd do the French dinners, and it was wonderful. But at the end of the day, it was the French government doing this. This son of a bitch took me to Russia. First class treatment. Now, we didn't travel first class, but that's okay because, I mean, this was the planes, trains, and automobile version of going to Russia. We flew economy class in. I'm an economy class kind of guy. When we did the train, economy class, with one exception, we did the business class Sansan train from St. Petersburg to Moscow just because we had no choice. We had to get to Moscow quickly. And then we drove. I mean, we drove from Volgograd to Grozny, from Grozny to Sevastopol. That's a 16-hour day. That's another 16-hour day. And it was Alexander at the wheel. He's not the kind of guy that hires a damn driver. He drives the damn thing himself. He did everything himself. And he was supported by a guy named Ilya Volkov, who was just a Russian guy who knows Alexander. His sister worked for Alexander, who spoke English. And Alexander said, want to be my interpreter? No, Ilya's not an interpreter. Ilya said, sure, I'll do this. Well, Ilya bit off more than he could chew because suddenly Ilya's being put on national TV, being asked to interpret complex discussions before a live Russian audience. But that's not what Ilya's job was. Ilya was my guide to the Russian soul. Ilya explained everything that was going on, perspective. He was the eyes in which I could see Russia. I mean, and that's what happened here. That's why this trip is so amazing, because it's not just about where I went, it's about who I met. And the people I'm meeting aren't government functionaries handpicked by the government to introduce me to Russia. These are Alexander's friends, people cut from the same piece of cloth, Russian patriots who all they wanted to do is bring an American in and show them Russia. And they did so. And it was just the most remarkable journey of my life. And all I want to do is to be able to say, I earned this. Now, the way I earn it is by treating this journey with respect, the respect that it deserves. This journey needs to be captured and it needs to be told to as many people as possible, so that people will now have a foundation of knowledge upon which they can begin their own journey. And I think if everybody participated in similar journeys of discovery, they don't have to be 26 days in 12 cities. Go to Russia for a week, go to Russia for 10 days, but go to Russia and meet the Russian people, because they are a beautiful people, they are a wonderful people, and they are epitomized by Alexander Zhiryanov, a man who more than anybody deserves the title of hero of Russia, not because of what he does in service of the people, but what he does in service of Russia every day that he wakes up. But here's the amazing thing. Russia is full of Alexander Zhiryanovs. The Russian people are patriotic. The Russian people love their country. And they're not all Alexander Zhiryanovs. There's women out there. I'm sure you've met them. I have to tell you, Russia has some of the most amazing women in the world. And I'm not talking about the beautiful women everybody talks about. I'm talking about the spine of the nation. There's a lot of Russian couples out there that have long and successful marriages. But there's a lot of Russian women who don't have successful marriages. There's a lot of single mothers out there. And these women are professional women. They work long jobs, difficult jobs. They raise families, and their children are educated, well-adjusted, and they're going to be good citizens. The Russian women hold this country together, hold Russia together. And that was one of the amazing insights that I got from it, was just how important women are. And then we get to the concept of what defines the Russian soul. And I will just tell you that one of the key aspects of the Russian soul is an articulable difference between men and women, meaning a man is a man, a woman is a woman. Now, I don't want to take this conversation any other direction, just to say that when we speak of Russia and what Russia is, again, Volgograd was an amazing presence, amazing city, amazing monuments, amazing history. But Mamayev Kurgan and the Motherland Calls statue of the Russian mother urging her sons forward to defend the nation. It's so powerful. But then you go to the base of it and you have the mother holding the dead child, the dead son, in a pool of tears. And you realize the sacrifice. And you realize that that which made Russia is the woman, is the mother. The mother made Russia. And
Mother Russia. Mother Russia, Scott.
It's Mother Russia. And the men have to understand that they are there because of Mother Russia, and they must serve Mother Russia. And they do realize that. That's the beauty of it all, is that I don't have to tell them any of this. I'm on a journey of discovery going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And they're all going, yeah, we know it. This is what we do. This is our lives. This is how we live it. And the amazing thing too is, and I don't know if you've seen this, but the cities are the cities, just like everywhere. Cities are full of very materialistic people. And I have to tell you, Moscow is full of materialistic people. Shallow people who are only focused on this, that, and the other thing. But the further you get away from the city, the more you get in touch with the real Russia. And it's the real Russians out there living their undramatic lives that define this nation. And it was remarkable to have the opportunity to see these people, to talk to them, to meet them. I'm not picking on the people in Moscow for all the Muscovites and St. Petersburg people who I met. I love you to death. You guys are wonderful, but you know what I'm talking about, because most of you don't come from Moscow. Most of you come from the cities that are out there, and all of you speak whimsically with passion about where you came from. And all of you recognize the complexity and artificiality of Moscow life. It's convenient, it's beautiful, it has luxury, etc. But you all know that in your heart, you are attracted back to that where you came from, Mother Russia. And that's one of the more wonderful aspects of this trip is that discovery. I'm still in the process of trying to digest it, but God, I hope I can earn this trip. That's all I can say. God, I hope I do Alexander Zarianov justice for what he did in inviting me to his country.
Scott, thank you so much for sharing this, and I don't want to take more time.
We got 10 minutes.
Oh, we do. Wow. Okay. I want to say that I have more questions, but I'm not going to go into those now. Next time, I just want to say, sign under what you said, especially about people coming to Russia and getting to know people. But then again, what you're saying, and from me personally as well, all I've seen really is Moscow and St. Petersburg, and I will be going to the countryside in a week from now, about 3 hours drive from Moscow. So I will have a little bit more sense of seeing different sides. And I have a feeling that entire Russia really is supporting Moscow, like creating Moscow. But this luxury life is just a very, very, very tiny portion of what this country is. People come here and they see how beautiful Moscow is and how many great restaurants and shopping and this and that. But it's actually very, how to say, I wouldn't say it's an illusion, but it's real. But at the same time, it's such a small part of this huge country, right?
Well, but look, you and I had a discussion earlier where you said, with all due respect, I disagree with you. And when throughout Russia, I would say things about Moscow. I love Moscow. I'm not a big fan of, but I loved the rest of Russia even more. So I would oftentimes pick on Moscow and say things about, for instance, the size of the Moscow metro, that Moscow builds more metros per year than all of Russia builds for everybody else, and things of that nature. And I would sort of make snide comments that Moscow exists based upon the wealth taken from the rest of Russia, the taxes that go in there. And people came back and they corrected me. They said, well, first of all, understand that Moscow is a donor city. And what that means is Moscow generates more capital than it consumes, and it actually takes money out to different regions and puts money back into Russia. That was an education for me. So maybe I should learn sometimes to shut up and learn more before I speak. And that was one of the occasions. Now, somebody told me that. I haven't gone in and checked it, but I respect the person who told me that. So I'm not questioning them. But it led me to believe, say, wait a minute, so maybe Moscow has a greater purpose. And the other thing they talked about is, the greater Moscow metro area is many, many, many millions of people. And they said, you do understand that the people that live out as Moscow expands, these metros are built not just to brag, but to move large amounts of people very efficiently, very safely. That there's more than just being beautiful, it's very efficient. That Moscow is an extraordinarily efficient city. And I went, you're right. It is an extraordinarily efficient city.
Yeah.
And the more you think about Moscow, the more you realize, and this is the point I'm going to make, that it very much is a reflection of Russia. It's not an anomaly. It's a reflection of Russia. It's what Russia can be if everything works properly.
I agree. It's exactly where Russia is heading, the future of Russia.
Because when you get out to, for instance, Novosibirsk, I mean, Alexander Zuryanov, who's in charge of, development, of economic development, he'll be the first one to tell you, we could do better. We could do better. There's better things we could do. We should be doing this. We could do this. We could do that. Meanwhile, it's building. It's growing. I think all of Russia is that way. All of Russia is improving. All of Russia is growing. They could do it better, and they will do it better. The Russians they have strategic vision, and they're executing a strategic vision imperfectly, as we all do. None of us are perfect, but the Russians are at least moving forward in a positive direction. I just talked about driving or going from Sheremetyevo into Moscow. Did you land in Sheremetyevo?
Yes. One of my trips.
Clean airport?
Yeah, well, the airports are very nice.
Modern airport, clean airport, efficient airport. And then you leave
Spacious.
The airport, spacious. And as you leave the airport, you're on this wide lane that takes you into Moscow, and traffic is flowing. And then when you look to the left and to the right, it's clean. There's not garbage everywhere. You look at the buildings. The only eyesore is the construction taking place. But that's a city being built. You're not seeing buildings collapsing, crumbling, falling down. Even when buildings are renovated in Moscow, they put up that artificial facade that makes it look like it's a real building. So you don't see the ugliness of what's behind. Compare that with landing in JFK, a horrible airport to land in. The infrastructure of the airport is crumbling as you speak. The moment you step out into the terminal, you're looking at decaying infrastructure. Well, however you leave the airport, you're looking at a city in decline. You're looking at bridges that are old and need to be repaired, roads with potholes, congestion. It takes me drive to get out of JFK. Normally, to get from the Tappan Zee Bridge to JFK, it's not the Tappan, I think it's the Mario Cuomo Bridge now. But to get there, 45 minutes is what it used to take under normal traffic conditions. I can't touch the Mario Cuomo Bridge in under 2 hours from JFK. It's ridiculous because of the congestion and the fact that you have, supposed repairs taking place all over the place. But the repairs, you have broken down vehicles, burned out vehicles, tires, garbage. It's an eyesore. And so I compare and contrast that, and I say, Moscow, we in America, we talk about, and I got to watch the clock here before I get divorced, but, America, we speak of the shining city on the hill. And Ronald Reagan used that illusion. America is the shining city on the hill. And all the world looks to America to that which it aspires to. Well, we now know that that's not the truth. America's got a lot of problems. We're not the shining city on the hill. I'd like us to be. I want us to be. I'd like to work in that direction, but we're not. But even within America, you put cities out there and you say, this city is sort of the epitome of social planning and what we want America to look like. And a lot of people put New York City up there and say, that's it, because people travel there. They say that's the city. But I have to tell you, New York City is not what you think it is. It's not horrible. People live there. There's neighborhoods that are good. Times Square is fun at night, anytime. It's beautiful, lights lighting up. But all I have to do is get down to 8th Avenue, 9th Avenue, New York City starts to crumble. As I move away from these areas of tourist attraction, New York City starts to crumble. Moscow, on the other hand, is the shining city on the hill. It is literally the shining city on the hill. And every urban planner in the world should look to Moscow and say, how can we do that? And it's not just the shining city on the hill from that standpoint, it's for the rest of Russia too. Russians look to Moscow to say, okay, that's a standard. That's a good standard. What can we do? All Russian cities judge themselves based upon Moscow. Now, they'll all be found wanting, but when people say, I mean, I heard it over and over again, they say, this park is as good as any you'll find in Moscow, and they're right. People will say, you know, Moscow, we have churches every bit as beautiful as the ones in Moscow, and they're right. You see, Moscow's the standard, the gold standard. And that's why I reappraise my notion on the city of Moscow. I still have a problem with Muscovites and the fact that they're not as patriotic as I think they should be, especially since they reside in the shining city on the hill, finds what Russia should be and can be. But they'll get there. I think that they're still too enamored with the West. I think many of them continue to hold out hope that someday relations will improve with the West and they can go back to having their Western jet set lifestyle. But the fact of the matter is those days are gone, and the rest of Russia has forgotten the West, jettisoned the West. They moved on to whatever Russia is going to be, and it's going to be a Russia independent of the West. Now I think, unfortunately, our time is done.
Thank you. Thank you so much for finding time for my questions today, and hope to connect with Scott again very soon.
Be ready to interrogate me fully and
more
see
Russia
if
questions. More Russia questions, Scott.
Yeah, see if I earned the trip. See if I earned the right to go on that trip.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the links to find Scott and his book you find below this video. And again, thank you for watching, guys. And until next time.